All right, so have you ever heard of a book so scandalous that it's been captivating readers for nearly 2,000 years?
A book.
Yeah, like we're talking juicy gossip
Yeah.
about Rome's most powerful figures.
Oh, wow.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's Suetonius and his Lives of the Caesars.
Ah, Suetonius. I mean, his work, it's incredible because it gives us such an intimate look at those Roman emperors.
It really is like the original Roman tell-all.
It is. And from Julius Caesar to Domitian.
Oh, and don't forget the scandals.
Of course, the scandals, their personalities,
Their private lives.
exactly their private lives.
And what I find fascinating is how influential this book became.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking rulers in the Middle Ages consulting it for guidance.
Oh.
Even modern shows like I, Claudius,
Oh, yeah.
taking inspiration from it.
It's amazing how Suetonius is still shaping how we view power even after all these centuries.
He really is.
One of the reasons the Lives of the Caesars continues to capture our imaginations is because it reads like a soap opera,
A soap opera.
full of family drama, shocking betrayals, power struggles.
Oh my gosh.
That would make the most outlandish reality TV shows seem tame.
That's a good point.
Right.
And it's not just the stories themselves, right?
No, it's not.
It's that Suetonius had this really unique insider perspective
Oh, he did.
because of his position at the Roman court.
He was right there in the thick of it.
He was able to give us a glimpse into the lives of these figures
Larger than life figures.
that nobody else could.
Absolutely. And he didn't hold back.
No, he's not.
He dives right into their personalities, their quirks, their flaws.
All the good stuff.
He gives us these incredibly vivid details about their lives, including some that, even by Roman standards, were considered scandalous.
It's that mix of shocking and mundane that really makes these emperors come to life.
You know, it's true.
Like on one page, you're reading about Augustus's bad teeth.
Right.
And on the next, you're learning about Nero's, well, let's just say his excesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that unexpected juxtaposition that makes the book so enduring.
It really does.
You see these emperors not as distant figures in a history book,
Right.
but as complex individuals
Yeah.
who loved, schemed, and ruled the most powerful empire the world had ever seen.
They become real people.
They do.
So are you ready to step back in time and explore the drama, the intrigue, and the shocking truths about these Caesars?
Let's do it. Where do we begin?
Well, let's start with the man who, in many ways, started it all. Julius Caesar.
Ah, yes, the great Caesar.
A military genius, a brilliant orator, and a man who changed the course of Roman history.
He definitely left his mark.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Suetonius, while acknowledging Caesar's accomplishments, also believed that he deserved to be assassinated.
Oh, wow.
He saw Caesar as a man corrupted by power.
That's a pretty insightful observation considering what happened next.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Caesar's death created a power vacuum, eventually filled by his adopted son, Augustus.
Augustus. Now, he's a fascinating character.
He is.
Because he was a master of image management, a
Oh.
true politician.
And Suetonius gives us this amazing anecdote about Augustus on his deathbed that really illustrates this.
Tell me about it.
Apparently, he gathered his friends around him and asked, "Do you think I played my part in the comedy of life well?"
He said that.
And then, like a true showman,
Oh, my goodness.
he quoted lines from a play.
No way.
"If the play has been a good one, clap your hands and let me leave the stage to the sound of your applause."
What a way to go.
I know, right?
It really highlights how Augustus understood that ruling Rome wasn't just about policy.
It was about so much more.
It was about performance, about crafting an image that would resonate with the people.
He knew how to play the crowd.
He did, and this wasn't just theatrics, you know?
No.
It demonstrated Augustus's core belief that governing was as much about shaping public perception as it was about enacting policies.
I never thought of it that way.
He understood the power of a well-crafted image. And that's a lesson that many leaders throughout history have taken to heart.
He set the bar incredibly high for those who followed, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Suetonius portrays the emperors who came after Augustus, like Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, as constantly grappling with his legacy,
It's like they were all living in the shadow of a giant.
trying to find their own way to wield power in a world that Augustus had fundamentally reshaped.
And each of these emperors, as we'll see, had their own unique story,
Their own strengths and weaknesses.
his own scandals and triumphs.
Tiberius, the grizzled general who withdrew to the island of Capri.
Oh, yes. very suspicious.
fueling all sorts of rumors. And then there's Caligula,
Caligula.
whose alleged madness and cruelty became legendary.
It did.
And Claudius, who, despite being underestimated because of his physical limitations and awkwardness,
Right.
managed to rule effectively for a surprisingly long time.
He did.
And of course, Nero,
Oh, Nero.
the emperor whose name has become synonymous with excess.
And whose death was as dramatic as his life.
Exactly. They each left their mark on Roman history for better or for worse.
Now, before we dive into the lives of these individual emperors, we need to address something that might be jarring to modern readers.
Oh, what's that?
Suetonius's very frank descriptions of the Caesars' private lives.
Particularly their sexual behavior.
Yes, and he goes into detail that might make some people blush.
Oh, I can imagine.
But we have to remember that Roman ideas of sexual morality were very different from our own.
Oh, they were completely different.
What might seem scandalous to us today was often viewed very differently in ancient Rome.
Exactly. To really understand Suetonius's accounts, we have to remember that the Romans didn't have the same rigid distinction between public and private life that we do.
It's true.
Even things we consider very private were often seen as reflections of one's public character.
So an emperor's personal behavior, including their sexual behavior,
Wasn't seen as something that should be kept hidden away.
right, it was part and parcel of their public image.
Their leadership, their overall character.
And it's important to note that the modern concepts of homosexual and heterosexual didn't really exist in Roman society.
They did not.
A Roman man's status was determined not by who he desired, but by his role in the sexual act,
Being the dominant partner was key to maintaining social standing.
regardless of the partner's gender.
Exactly. That's a really important point.
So when Suetonius describes the sexual preferences of various emperors, he's not doing it to sensationalize or to judge them by our modern standards.
Right.
He's simply reporting on it as part of their overall character and how they were perceived by others.
Precisely. However, what was a big deal in Roman society was the power dynamic.
Oh, the power dynamic for
Well,
sure.
It was culturally accepted that powerful men could, and often did, exploit their inferior sexually.
But the reverse, a powerful man being the passive partner in a sexual relationship,
Was considered deeply shameful.
it was unacceptable for a man who aspired to rule Rome.
Exactly. This explains why the rumors about Julius Caesar's alleged relationship with the king of Bithynia were so damaging to his reputation.
It wasn't about the person. It was about the perceived loss of control, the implication of weakness that came with being seen as sexually passive.
It's a reminder that when we're looking back at history, we have to try to understand it through the lens of the time, not our own modern values.
It can be hard to do that sometimes.
It can.
And Suetonius, despite his own potential biases, gives us a window into a world so different from our own, where power, sexuality, and public image were intertwined in ways we can barely fathom today.
It's truly fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
So let's move on to Tiberius.
Okay, Tiberius.
The emperor who, after ruling for a number of years, decided to withdraw to the island of Capri.
Oh yeah, Capri.
Now, you might think island life sounds idyllic, but for a Roman emperor,
Yeah, that's kind of strange.
it raised a lot of eyebrows.
It was seen as incredibly suspicious.
What?
Like he was trying to hide from something or someone.
Right.
And remember, in Roman culture, a desire for privacy.
Oh, yeah, that was a big no-no.
It almost implied you were up to no good.
Exactly. And Suetonius doesn't come right out and say Tiberius was engaged in nefarious activities.
He doesn't.
No, instead, he lays out the facts, the isolation, the secrecy surrounding Tiberius's life on Capri, and lets the reader draw their own conclusions.
Oh, that's sneaky.
It's a very subtle form of storytelling, but incredibly effective.
And being the master storyteller that he is, Suetonius doesn't disappoint when it comes to the details.
He does not.
He describes Tiberius's alleged activities on Capri with, shall we say, quite a bit of color,
He really paints a picture.
painting a picture of an emperor indulging in desires that were considered scandalous,
Even by Roman standards.
even by Roman standard. Wow.
But this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
We have to ask ourselves how much of this is based on fact and how much is exaggeration.
Or even outright fabrication.
Remember, Suetonius was writing decades after Tiberius's death,
Oh, that's right.
and during a time when the imperial court was a hotbed of political intrigue.
So it's possible that these scandalous stories about Tiberius were being spread as rumors
Oh, absolutely.
or even as deliberate propaganda by his enemies.
Like an ancient Roman smear campaign.
Exactly.
That's a distinct possibility we have to consider, that Suetonius might have been influenced by the political climate of his time.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Perhaps these stories about Tiberius served to legitimize the rule of his successors, or to discredit those who oppose the current emperor.
History is rarely straightforward.
It really isn't. There are always layers of interpretation, competing narratives, hidden agendas.
That we need to unravel.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes studying history so fascinating.
It really is.
We're not just memorizing facts and dates.
Right.
We're trying to understand the motivations, the biases, the social and political contexts that shaped the events and the people we're studying.
Okay, so let's move on to Caligula.
Caligula.
Even without Suetonius's account, his reputation for madness and cruelty is pretty well established.
Yes. Caligula is a fascinating figure. He's the emperor who seemed to delight in pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable behavior.
Really?
Suetonius describes him openly flaunting his alleged affairs with his sisters,
Oh my.
throwing lavish banquets where guests were treated like slaves, even dressing up as a woman.
Really? As a woman?
Actions that were deeply shocking for a Roman emperor.
It's almost as if he was deliberately trying to provoke and scandalize his people,
Maybe he was.
to assert his power in the most outrageous ways imaginable.
It's possible that his actions were a calculated display of power, a way of demonstrating that he was above the law, beyond the constraints of social norms.
The kind of, look at me, I'm the emperor, and I can do whatever I want attitude.
Precisely. But there's also the possibility that Caligula might have been suffering from a mental illness, which could have been exacerbated by the immense pressure and isolation of being emperor.
It's like trying to diagnose someone from 2,000 years ago based on a handful of written accounts.
It is, we can speculate, but we can never truly know what was going on in Caligula's mind.
Was he a cruel tyrant, a mentally unstable ruler, or simply a product of his time and the immense power he wielded?
Suetonius, while giving us a lot to think about, doesn't offer any easy answers.
And that's part of the enduring allure of the lives of the Caesars.
It is.
It presents these complex, contradictory figures
Right.
and invites us to grapple with the ambiguities of history, to piece together the truth from a mixture of fact, rumor, and interpretation.
It's like a historical puzzle.
It is. We have some of the pieces, but not all of them.
And even when we think we've figured it out,
There's always another twist.
another detail that emerges and throws our assumptions into question.
Exactly. And that brings us to Claudius,
Claudius.
an emperor who is often overlooked, but whose life and reign were anything but ordinary.
He's the emperor who inspired Robert Graves' famous novel, I, Claudius,
Oh, yes.
which, as you mentioned earlier, was adapted into a very popular TV series.
I love that show.
It's full of all the drama and intrigue that we've been talking about.
And it really brings the world of ancient Rome to life.
It does.
And Claudius, who is often portrayed as weak and unsuited for rule, manages to outmaneuver his rivals
He does.
and actually rule for 13 years.
It's quite a remarkable story of survival and resilience.
He did.
Suetonius does a good job of highlighting Claudius's unexpected strengths.
He does.
He might not have been the most imposing figure,
Right.
but he was intelligent, cunning, and perhaps surprisingly, quite a skilled administrator.
You know, it's interesting. Suetonius describes Claudius as having a speech impediment, a limp,
Oh, really?
and being easily mocked by others.
Wow.
Yet he also portrays him as a capable ruler
He does.
who implemented important reforms and even expanded the empire.
It's this contrast between his perceived weaknesses and his actual accomplishments.
That makes Claudius such a fascinating character.
He really challenges our assumptions about what it takes to be a successful leader.
It makes you wonder how history might have judged him differently if he hadn't been physically impaired or socially awkward.
It really does. Would we remember him as a great emperor?
Or would he still be overshadowed by figures like Augustus and Nero?
It's hard to say.
But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's shift our focus to the later emperors,
Okay.
those who came after the Julio-Claudian dynasty.
The ones who followed.
The story of the Caesars doesn't end with Nero.
It does not.
What happened after the fall of the first imperial family?
That's a great question.
How did the emperors who followed try to legitimize their rule?
Well, this is where the lives of the Caesars takes on a bit of a different tone.
Oh, how so?
The emperors who come after Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian are presented as somewhat less grand,
Less grand.
less connected to that almost mythical aura that surrounded the Julio-Claudians.
It's like the air has gone out of the balloon a bit.
You're picking up on it exactly.
The drama is still there, but the stakes feel different.
These emperors are often portrayed as more pragmatic, more focused on consolidating power and maintaining stability.
Than on building grand legacies.
Or creating spectacle.
Which makes sense after the chaos and bloodshed of Nero's reign.
Right.
Stability would have been a top priority.
Absolutely. And Suetonius himself seems to reflect this shift in tone.
How so?
He's still fascinated by the personalities and quirks of these later emperors, but there's a sense of detachment, almost a recognition that the era of those larger-than-life figures like Augustus and Nero is over.
It's like he's acknowledging that even empires and the stories we tell about them eventually fade into the background of history.
But even in this more subdued tone, Suetonius still manages to highlight the complexities of power, the challenges of leadership.
And that enduring human desire.
For both stability and excitement, it's a reminder that even the most powerful figures are still human.
Shaped by the same ambitions, weaknesses, and desires as the rest of us.
And their stories, as told by Suetonius, continue to resonate with us centuries later.
Reminding us that the past is never truly past, and that the lessons we can learn from it are just as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. You know, before we wrap up our deep dive into Suetonius and the lives of the Caesars,
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the man himself.
Suetonius.
Yeah, like, who was this guy who had such incredible access to the inner workings of the Roman Empire?
Well, that's what makes Suetonius so intriguing.
Yeah?
He's not just a biographer.
No,
He's a witness to history.
that's true.
He lived through some of the most tumultuous periods in Roman history
Yeah.
and was able to observe these emperors and their courts up close.
It makes his writing so much more vivid, doesn't it?
It really does.
He wasn't just reading about these emperors in old scrolls.
No.
He was actually there,
Right there in the thick of it.
seeing the drama unfold firsthand.
Exactly. And we get glimpses of this personal experience sprinkled throughout the lives of the Caesars.
Oh, I love that.
Like when he casually mentions that his grandfather saw Caligula riding across the Bay of Naples on a bridge made of boats.
No way.
Or when he recounts in rather vivid detail witnessing the examination of a 90-year-old man
Oh, my goodness.
who was accused of trying to avoid paying taxes imposed on Jews.
Wow, talk about a story that sticks with you.
Right.
It's those little details, those moments of personal recollection
Yeah.
that make Suetonius' work so much more engaging than a dry historical account.
Absolutely.
It's like he's pulling back the curtain of time and letting us peek into the world he lived in.
And speaking of pulling back curtains, Suetonius' position at the imperial court gave him access to an incredible amount of information.
It really did.
He worked in the imperial archives, the libraries.
Oh, wow.
He even served as the Emperor Hadrian's personal secretary.
That's like having the keys to the kingdom.
It is.
No wonder he was able to write such detailed and comprehensive biographies.
I know.
He had access to information that most people could only dream of.
He was in the right place at the right time, and he clearly took his research seriously.
He did.
He cites sources, corroborates accounts, and even presents conflicting viewpoints.
That's so important.
He wasn't just accepting the official version of events.
Wow.
He was actively trying to get at the truth, even if it wasn't pretty or flattering.
That's what makes him such a credible historian, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's not trying to create a sensationalized story. He's presenting the evidence as he found it,
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
letting the reader form their own conclusions.
And that's a valuable lesson for anyone who's interested in history,
Absolutely.
or even just in understanding the world around them.
We are constantly bombarded with information these days.
We are.
It's more important than ever to be critical thinkers,
Yes.
to question our sources, to look for multiple perspectives.
Suetonius reminds us that history isn't just a collection of names, dates, and battles.
No, it's not.
It's about people,
Real people.
their motivations, their flaws,
Right.
and the choices they made that shaped the course of events.
And it's also a reminder that the past is never truly past.
It's always with us.
The themes that Suetonius explores, power, ambition, the seductive nature of authority, the human cost of empire, these are all issues that we're still grappling with today.
They resonate through the centuries.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can we learn from Suetonius and his lives of the Caesars?
Well, on one level, it's a cautionary tale.
About power.
about the dangers of unchecked power and the corrosive influence of ambition.
But it's also an invitation.
To think critically about the stories we tell about the past.
And to recognize
That history is always more complex and nuanced than we might initially think.
it's a reminder that even the most powerful figures are still human,
Driven by the same desires
susceptible to the same failing,
as the rest of us, and their choices, for better or worse.
have consequences that ripple through time.
Suetonius challenges us to question the narratives we've been given,
Yeah.
to dig deeper and to try to understand the complexities of the past.
His work serves as a reminder that the study of history isn't about memorizing facts. It's about engaging in a conversation with the past
A conversation that can inform our understanding of the present.
and help us to navigate the challenges of the future.
That's a great note to end on.
It is. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Suetonius and the Roman Empire, be sure to subscribe for more fascinating journeys into the world of history and ideas. Until next time.